Welcome to Leader U by Black River Performance Management, where we believe work should fuel the human spirit, not drain it. In this leadership podcast, we will dive into the lived experiences of people flourishing in today's workplace and beyond. Join us to hear real-life examples of experiences from our own lives and from the leaders we know and trust.
Thank you for joining us on the Leader U podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Randy'L Teton. She is a member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes of the Fort Hall Reservation. She's a first-degree college graduate with 11 plus years of experience in tribal government, public relations, museum studies, history, and community development. Her educational background includes a Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, Museum Studies degree from the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Fort Lewis College, Durango, Colorado, and completed 8 years of museum training at the Smithsonian National Museum of American Indians, NMAI, in both Washington, D.C. and New York City, the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, Wyoming, and the Bureau of Historical Sites, Peebles Island in New York City, in the following area in studies, including conservation, exhibition planning, and tribal ethnographic research. Over the years, she has been instrumental in various communication and museum projects throughout the Indian country. Recently, she played a significant role with collaborating with media projects, including Disney Plus and Netflix. She also has her first published children's book to be released, and I believe it already has been released, which we're going to talk about, and it's highlighting Sacajawea from a tribal perspective. She has a plethora of awards and so many. She's got 20 under 40, Lifetime Achievement Award, Idaho Hometown Hero, just a variety of awards, and I'm really honored to have you here today. The first time we met was when you were getting the Idaho Lifetime Achievement Award for the Idaho Business Review, and we were on stage together because I got the Entrepreneur Award at that time. But we ran into each other. I got to be at your Zonta Yellow Rose. So we keep running into each other, and I work with a lot with the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, helping them to develop leadership competencies and their own capacity to lead themselves and lead their teams more effectively. So I'm really excited to have you here as a spokesperson about your tribe and all the information that you have that you can share, the wisdom, traditions, rituals, stuff that just the average person doesn't know. So
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And again, my name is Randy'L Teton, and a tribal member of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes, born and raised in Blackfoot, outside of Blackfoot, on the reservation, which we call the Lincoln Creek District. There are 5 districts that make up the entire reservation, and I'm from the smallest district, and attended public school. And I just want to say, hello to my tribal people, my family, Zandave, which in our language means good afternoon. And it really is good to be here. In my community, I'm also not only known as Randy'L or Sacajawea, but my given name, which is Hido, which was given to me by my parents, named after one of my maternal ancestors, and it means meadowlark, which is the bird. It's the bird that sings in the morning. It generates motivation and to start the spring off. So I'm really thankful for that name. And you listed a lot of things, my bio, and I feel that. The walk that I have, been walking, it's almost like walking in 2 worlds, in a sense that I represent my tribal side, but also walking in the modern contemporary world, wearing heels, and then I go back to our cultural sense where I'm wearing moccasins, and so with that, what I mean by that is that I always remember the teachings of my family and my tribe, which is to be humble, be respect, and give thanks for every day that we wake up. My grandmother always would remind us, first thing in the morning, you go greet the sun, bless yourself, and just be thankful for being alive. And that has really helped build my foundation as a young individual. Leaving the reservation when I was 18 and a half, after I graduated from Blackfoot High School, I really didn't know where I was going to go to college, but I knew I was going to go to college. Nobody pressured me to go to college. My parents were great. They didn't say, you need to go to college. It really was my choice. And I think it started when I was in the tribal job employment training that they offer. And I was 14, and they asked me, where would you like to work? And I said the Tribal Museum. And that's because it was an easy choice. My mother was the manager of the museum. And I basically was already working there. I was already mopping the floors and washing her display cases. And so for me, it was just a natural fit. I knew the job task. But in that job, it really opened my eyes up to the need for telling our own stories and being able to understand my tribal history, not just my tribe, but my family history. Where did we come from? What does our last name mean? So all these questions were asked of me that I started to ask myself. And so with that, I started doing research with the tribal members, the elders that would come in to visit my mom. She had this photography collection of historical photos. And it was a project that she was doing with Smithsonian. And they were trying to identify the different people that were in these historical photos. And so we had a variety of elders coming in through the museum and saying, that's my grandpa or that's my uncle. And, it just really sparked interest in me, where I really took it upon myself to read up on what was available. And during that time, there was not a lot of resources available. There was no books that were written by tribal authors. And a lot of the history was written by anthropologists, and they were male, white males that were writing about us. And I just really felt compelled to want to take that further and start writing our own stories and documenting. And so I chose as my degree to go into museum studies. And so there was one program that was available to Native Americans, and that was at the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. That's a mouthful.
That's cool.
And that's where the doors opened. That's where I really got a personal insight from tribal perspective, the European perspective, and started applying that to my experience and my choices of taking on internships. And so I was able to go to the National Museum of American Indian in Washington, D.C., actually in New York City first, and being one of 10, maybe 2 of 10 were Native American interns in that program, and I was one of them. And this is, I hate to say this, but, it was really early. It was like long ago. It was in the 90s. And, I was a young girl, and from then on, the doors opened, and I just began my path of history in museums. And, the Sacajawea also was a huge ask from people. When I worked at the museum, who is she? Is she from Fort Hall? Are you related to her? Does she have any children? There were so many questions that we received. And again, very limited books about Sacajawea that were really written from a historical perspective. Also, it was controversial as well during that time. This was way before social media, even before laptops,
Right.
We had
YouTube.
we had landlines and faxes.
Party lines.
Exactly. And so, so I'm stepping back and giving everybody a knowledge of my foundation and where it all began, Tribal Museum, just venturing out and wanting to do something that would impact our community in the long run, not knowing where it would land me today.
It's what a brave woman you are. That is incredible to just step into your soul and what it's calling you to do, even though you don't know what is going and who's going to be criticizing or who's going to be like just being able to go, I'm doing this regardless. I don't know how it's going to work, but I'll figure it out as I go.
Yep, and that's what I did. And, through all of that education and opportunities, I always came back. I always returned home because of just the cultural ceremonies that we had going on and family passing away because I'm very close with my family on both sides, Teton and Osborne. And, so I have a huge family.
Can you share the Teton name and where we live and for people who are outside the area or even outside our country?
Yeah, sure. Okay, well, so my family, the Tetons, we actually historically come from the Grand Teton area. So the Driggs, the Jackson Hole area. My great grandpa and his family, they actually resided over by Jenny's Lake.
Oh,
and
beautiful.
Our hunting grounds were Driggs and parts of West Yellowstone. And, so of course this was way before the establishment of the Yellowstone National Park and the Grand Teton National Park. And so my grandfather shared some stories with my dad and my uncles and aunts about how they used to, there was plenty of game. We're talking elk and deer. And of course, our roots, we had wild onions, we had camas, we had medicinal items that we would go and gather and harvest. And so we utilize that area, and even today, we still are able to gather some resources, not necessarily hunt, but that's the important part of having that agreement and that relationship with the Park Service. And so they've been great to work with and acknowledge the tribe's presence, both historically and current. And actually, I was over in the Driggs and Jackson Hole area doing a museum project probably about 2 years ago. And I was letting them all know, my family's history. And so that has actually opened up a lot more discussions about acknowledging the different families from Fort Hall and from Fort Washakie. Because again, I think a lot of people don't realize is that when the reservations were being created in the late 1880s, a lot of the tribes were displaced and forced to choose which reservation do you want to go to. Do you want to go to Idaho, which is Fort Hall, or do you want to go to Wyoming, Fort Washakie? Now that's at a government level of saying you make a choice, but tribally it was which leader are you going to follow? And so again, my family they chose Fort Hall, Idaho. And my grandfather, when the reservation was created, he specifically created the area where we have family land, and that's in Lincoln Creek, because it was closer to the Jackson Hole, Wyoming boundary line.
Wow.
And I knew I didn't know all of this growing up, because this isn't just something that we talk over the dinner table. This is something that you have to ask.
You have to dig, right?
You have to ask the elders, and and it's not just a 15-minute conversation. It's sitting down, having coffee, and eating and engaging in conversation about our family history. And I did that because I felt that it was important for me to know, to understand. And I share all of this information with my children. I have three,
right?
I have three
Yes.
children, 2 sons and a daughter.
Adorable.
Kumia, Pongos, and Abalone. And, so they're very enriched with our tribal history and everything that I do. I constantly let them know this is why mom is going to this event, or this is why mom received this award. And it's because the work that we do, and just keeping our culture alive and letting people know that we're thriving as a community, as a family, We're doing good things that are impacting everybody in the community, not just our
Huge.
reservation.
No, huge ripples of impact.
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you here, because there are listeners, and many of us are uneducated in a lot of these things. And this is why it's so important to share the message and the history and actually learn more, because when we know better, we can do better.
Exactly. And, feel free, to reach out. I've got a website, randylteton.com. There's an email address, if there's any questions. But, overall, I think that my path where it has led me to today, it really, the basis is just asking questions. There is no dumb question, and I utilize that with everyone wherever I go. Whether I'm doing cultural teachings or whether I'm at a school talking about Sacajawea. One thing I always encourage is ask, because if you don't ask, you don't know, and when you don't know, there's assumptions,
Right.
and you don't want to assume something that was completely wrong, and it'll just steer you off the path.
Yeah, well, it happened today when I had this Sacajawea doll, and I asked you, does this have any sort of relevance? And you're like, no. But I don't know unless I ask. And even like the book, let's take it to dumb it down for us all. Bring it down to tell us yes, she's got a children's book, Sacajawea. It's called It's Her Story. Can you just give us the overview of what you share, and is she from your tribe? All of those things.
Yeah, so this is Indigenous storytelling at its best. This is exactly what we talk about when anyone talks about Indigenous storytelling. My research started when I was at the museum, so I was 15, and I'm in my 40s now. But it's taken me over 40 years to write this book.
I just got goosebumps.
Yes. I
Yes.
mean, I was so pleased. I was very happy. And, it's called It's Her Story, Sacajawea. It's a graphic novel that I wrote. And it's illustrated beautifully by another Shoshone-Bannock tribal member, and her name is Ellie McKnight. And when I provided the manuscript, the storyline to my editor, she provided it to Ellie, and Ellie did an amazing job of bringing it to life. I didn't have to handhold on how Sacajawea should look, what she was wearing, down to just the details of the landscape of where our people lived. So to answer the question, Sacajawea is Lemhi Shoshone, and in our language we refer to them as the Agaidika, which is the salmon eaters. And a lot of our Shoshone and Bannock people are categorized by what we ate. And so where we were geographically placed, or where they chose to camp, and what they ate is what they were called.
Okay.
And so we have a variety of different bands. But Sacajawea was, or is Lemhi Shoshone, and she was 10 years old when she was captured by our enemy tribe, the Mandan Hidatsas, who are in North Dakota. That's where their reservation is. And so one thing I always tell the kids is, can you imagine having to walk in your moccasins from Idaho to North Dakota? Because that's what Sacajawea did, along with the other females that were taken. Wow. They took horses, they took our young women, and Sacajawea was one. And so her story is so amazing. She was so young, and she went through so much. And so for me, it's like she represents courage. She represents that inner strength that we as mothers, because she was a young mother, so she represents all of those elements that we want to be. And it's not that she was wanting that, it's just that's how she was. It was her.
It's what happened.
It's what happened, and it's how she responded to it. She was so strong. I mean, so 10 years old, taken away from Idaho, and then having to be with the Mandan Hidatsas. And in my book, it will go through all of that. And I use our language in this book because, again, that's important for us to recognize. Our language, is definitely one that we're having some issues with. I would have to say that, growing up, I was surrounded by fluent speakers, including my grandparents. But the boarding school, it really had a huge impact on a lot of tribal communities. And so now there's this huge trend of language revitalization. I wish that I was a fluent speaker. I speak a little bit, and I understand the conversations in Shoshone and Bannock because that's what my grandparents were. My grandfather was Bannock, so he spoke a lot of Bannock. And, growing up around that, you don't really know, oh, my grandpa's speaking Bannock. Right. It's only when I got older when we started categorizing, oh, that's Shoshone or that's Bannock. And because there's different ways that they do things too. But in my book, it's Shoshone words. And again, I felt that was important for our young readers to see and learn some Shoshone words. So again, this whole book, it takes you on a journey with Sacajawea and the things that she had to go through. She was about 14, 13 when she was pregnant, and that's not always found in our books. I know when I studied in fourth grade history, Idaho history is taught in fourth grade, and a lot of what I capture, you can't find anywhere else. But this is all true facts of her story. It's told from a Shoshone perspective. And again, like I mentioned, the research that I did, was asking the elders who are no longer with us about Sacajawea. And there's a lot of different versions of like what happened to her after the journey. But most importantly, Sacajawea was about 14 years old when she was on the Lewis and Clark expedition. And, that within itself with a newborn and going on this journey on foot. And she was able to represent a white flag for the Lewis and Clark expedition. And honestly, if it wasn't for Sacajawea being a part of the expedition, a lot of tribes would have went to war on Lewis and Clark. So, she played that role unknowingly, and she did a really good job at communicating because, again, not all tribes speak the same language. And so she was able to use her hands and speak with them on, food, we need supplies. There was like a universal way of communicating, and a lot of the old ones knew that, and that's dying out. So again, this book is available on my website. I have a couple of outlets in Blackfoot and Fort Hall. You can get it at the Tribal Museum. You can get it at the casino, hotel, gift shop in Blackfoot. Oh, and then also in Boise, the Idaho State Historical Society gift shop, and then Museum of Idaho gift shop. So there are a couple places. They're all autographed. And I think just overall, this is another resource when it comes to Native American heritage and really giving acknowledgement to Sacajawea and her sacrifice of just surviving this expedition. I mean, It's an amazing story, even down to her name. And I think that's another one.
That was my next question. We talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to know the pronunciation because even that, I'm like, is it Sacajawea or Sacajawea or what are all the other pronunciations?
So in Shoshone way, we reference her with the J spelling, so Sacajawea. So growing up in Idaho, growing up on the Fort Hall Reservation, we reference her as Sacajawea. Now, what got a little technical down the way when she was acknowledged by the United States Mint, they actually chose the G, so they reference her as Sacajawea. And then when she was with the Mandan Hidatsas, because of their the way that they phonetically speak, they named her Sacajawea.
Okay.
And so, again, there is no right or wrong way, but, again, being Shoshone and she's Shoshone, respectfully, I would ask that she be referred to as Sacajawea.
Now that I know better, I can do better. And that's what I grew up learning. And then I learned I was wrong. And then the history was wrong. So then I'm just wondering, what do I say or how do I talk about these? And sometimes we're just trying not to offend and we're trying to learn, right?
Yes.
It's okay.
Always. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm working with some public school districts in making sure that they have this book. I've actually been visiting in the past, since this book came out in October of last year, 2023. And it was posted on Amazon's website. And it actually, in November, it was acknowledged as Amazon's top-selling children's book, which,
so
was
incredible.
amazing. I didn't do anything. I let the book speak for itself. But again, this is definitely a story I would love everybody in our state and our
Beyond.
outlining states just talking about Sacajawea. This is the real deal. This is written by myself, who, again, been researching her for years, not knowing that I would be the model for.
Yeah. So let's talk about that next piece in the journey, right? The model. So what happened there?
Okay. Well, what happened is I left the reservation and went to college. And I was a junior at the University of New Mexico when I got a call from my mother, and my mother was working at the Institute of American Indian Arts Museum at that time. And she said, we just had a lady, an artist by the name of Glenna Goodacre, stop by. She was hired by the United States Mint for a new dollar coin project. And she's seeking a Shoshone model. And my mom says, I showed her a picture of you. And again, this is a time where we had no cell phones. And so it was typical of a mom to have the little photos in the wallet with that cute little plastic sheath, right?
Yes.
So my mother showed the artist her 3 daughters. And right away, the artist, she says, I would like her. And she was referencing my picture. And my mother said, you're in luck, because out of my 3 daughters, Randy'L's going to school in Albuquerque. So she's only 66 miles away. So Glenna was pretty excited. And so, again, I get this call randomly to do some modeling. First thing that pops in my mind is Teen Magazine. And I'm thinking to myself, modeling to me means I need to be tall and skinny. And, I'm not tall, and I'm okay, I'm not really skinny. But again, I was very interested. And so I said yes. And Glenna actually got me a rental car from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, because I was living in the dormitories. And so I didn't have a vehicle at the time. And then she called me and said, my mom told her, she said yes. So Glenna called me and she's like, well, how are you going to get to Santa Fe? So she got me a rental. And so the moment that I drove up to the address that she gave to me, there was no Google Maps.
Yep.
Okay.
You have an atlas? Did you have a ginormous atlas?
It was the mini one.
Okay.
I looked at the streets, and I knew I was familiar with the streets. And so I knew, wow, that this is somebody. This is somebody important, because she was on Canyon Road. And if anybody listening, and if you know, Canyon Road is where all the famous studios are. It's like the place where people are going and they're just driving by these huge Adobe studios. Beautiful. So I pull up to her gate and let her know. She let me access in. And I just remember driving up, and there was all these beautiful, whimsical children sculptures going up her driveway. Pull up, and she opens up this huge barn door to her studio. And the first thing I see is Ronald Reagan, a huge 10-foot sculpture piece of Ronald Reagan. And I'm thinking, why do you have a Ronald Reagan sculpture piece? And she says, oh, I just completed that. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, you know, she is amazing. And so we started talking about this project, and she informed me that this was a confidential project, and they were going to replace Susan B. Anthony on the dollar coin, which was silver, and it had a lot of edges on there. Supposedly, it wasn't a very popular coin. And so the U.S. Mint, in efforts to keep the coin alive, they decided to change the design. And so after conversing and meeting with their committee of fine arts, they came up with a replacement, and that was going to be Sacajawea.
Okay.
So that was the first time that I found out. And I was just ecstatic. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is awesome. Because again, I've been reading up, I've been researching about Sacajawea.
And now you're a model.
And now I'm going to be a model for Sacajawea. And so we were excited. And then we were telling Glenna, we were like, you know, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to be wearing my street clothes. We need to do this right. We need to do this culturally right. So we recommended we're going to need to get a deerskin dress. And she did overnight.
Wow.
She made some calls. She's influential. She knows people. And we came back the next day, and we get a knock at the door, and there's this individual from a local gallery, and he had a deerskin dress. And it was an original deerskin dress that was dated back in the late 1800s. Being of museum mind, I'm thinking this needs to be in a museum. This should be not even being touched and worn.
Right.
So they gave it to me, and I was so scared to put it on. I really had a fear that it was not going to fit because our girls back in those days were a lot smaller because our daily appetite, or not daily appetite, I should say, our daily nutrition, you know, was not like what we do.
And it was more active. You were
It
out.
was
Yeah.
active.
Yeah.
It was deer meat. It was roots. It was, you know, broths. Not McDonald's and Burger King and
Starbucks.
And so I really was, you know, nervous. And so I go put it on, and it fit perfectly.
Wow.
I just knew right then and there that this was going to be a good day. And I was ready. And so we went and took all day doing photo shoots. And, you know, I didn't see those photos for over a year because after that photo shoot, Glenna said, okay, thank you. And now it's time for her to get to work, meaning she needed to start coming up with designs. I do want to say to everybody out there that there are no existing photos or sketches of Sacajawea. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. And that's interesting because the Lewis and Clark, they sketched everything from flora, fauna, people, landscapes, everything in their journals, but never sketched Sacajawea.
Wow.
And so that left it very wide open for the U.S. Mint to accomplish such a task. And they chose 23 artists from around the nation, and Glenna was just one of them. So when she informed me that, you know, I need to create a proposal of what Sacajawea and what she's going to look like on this coin, you know, so she had a lot of work to do. We gave her as much guidance as we could. We definitely stressed that, you know, Shoshone women, we tend to have larger eyes. Our hair were worn in braids. She might have been wearing some shell earrings. And so you see all of that in the coin. And, you know, but what we didn't advise of was the baby. And I'm so grateful that Glenna included her baby, Jean-Baptiste. That's his name. And his father is French-Canadian. So, of course, he's given a French name. And so he served as the youngest member of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And she served as the only and first Native American in a United States expedition. So there are lots of historical facts with just her. Now, the baby that you see on the coin, nobody knows this, but actually Glenna picked up a doll that her grandchild had in the studio. And she says, Randy, how would you guys carry a baby? And I said, well, we would have been using a baby board, but we need to think about what would Sacajawea have done. Now, she was not, at the time that she got pregnant, it was in Mandan Hidatsa. So we don't think that she would have used a Mandan Hidatsa baby board because they were a lot different than the Shoshone cradle boards. So we wrapped the baby around using a cloth and told her that she might have been using an animal skin to wrap baby around. So she had her hands, but yet baby was so close that she can hear baby in case he was hungry or needed to be fed or changed. And so that's what she captured. And so, again, you look at that coin, it tells a story. And I'm sharing that with everybody is that, those are the aspects that we shared with Glenna, and she was able to capture it and listen. And again, I did not see those designs over a year. So I was advised, go back to school.
Go live your life.
Yep. Continue your life.
Yes.
And we'll call you.
Yeah.
And they did. 1 year later.
Wow.
1 year later, I get a call from Philip Dill, who was the former U.S. Mint director. He calls me, leaves a message, and says, congratulations, you and Glenna were selected as one of the top designs. I did not know what that meant.
Yeah.
And he says, we're going to post them on the usmint.gov website. I didn't have a laptop. There was no laptops. There was computers, desktops. So I go to the computer lab, and he says they're going to be posted 6 o'clock Eastern time. So Mountain time, that's 4 o'clock. I couldn't sleep all night. I was just restless. I was anxious, excited. Go to the computer pod room, and first and only one in there at 4 o'clock in the morning.
How far was that away from you?
It was across the campus.
Yes.
It was still a little dark. But I log in, usmint.gov, and the first thing that pops up is my face.
Wow.
And I just was like, oh my gosh. I was just excited because I'm on the internet.
Yeah, right.
I'm on the internet. And so I went and printed out like 30, 50 pages. But not only was there one one design, there was 5 designs that were included. So you swipe, and I was swiping, and I was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I was a little confused because when he said that our design was selected, I didn't know that there was more than one design that was selected. And he said the people are going to vote, so the public. And again, this was during the time where we didn't have social media to go and share and encourage people to go vote or like and love it. This was during the time where you had to email people and tell them to go vote.
Right.
Or fax them, like that's sad. But so it ended up getting a very overwhelming response. And the design that you see is the winning design, and the rest is history. They titled me as the youngest and only living model on U.S. currency. They asked me if I would travel with them to help promote the campaign. Now, keep in mind, at that time, I was a senior in college, and I knew how important it was for me to graduate. So I let them know that, and they were very respectful of my time, and they said, we're going to go ahead and include you on the tour, but we're going to need you to probably come to Philadelphia a lot. And when he says that, he means the Philadelphia U.S. Mint. So I got to tour the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia from the whole building.
Wow.
I got to witness the making of the coins. I got to feel the actual brand new coins when they're coming off the belt.
Cool.
I held my hand out, and they were hot. And so I was going like this. And so a lot of great experiences that nobody would ever know. And I'm right here from Southeast Idaho, and, I was rubbing shoulders with congressmen, senators, and, people of influence, but that wasn't a big deal to me. What was a big deal was the fact that finally there is a Native American coin, that there is a real Native American person on a piece of our money.
Hell yeah.
It represents.
That is amazing.
It represents
Yes.
Indigenous
Yes.
pride.
Yeah.
I mean, this
That is
land.
a huge deal.
This land is all Native American. I mean, we were thriving on
It's
this
about
land.
time.
Yeah, it is.
It was
It's
about time.
and it's about time that Sacajawea was recognized in that U.S. expedition. Honestly.
Amen, for sure. I'm so thankful you're here to share. I'm literally just seeing so much moral beauty right now, and I'm choked up just to no, seriously, just to see like the journey you've been on, how you've been able to share Sacagawea's story, how you've been able to share the story of your culture, your heritage. I find it fascinating, and also want to be a part to help in what ways that I can. And some of the ways that I can is by a voice that I have, or helping your people also with their leadership skills and helping them to have a voice. And that's some of the, I've mentored some Shoshone-Bannock tribal members in public speaking and in finding their voice and helping them deal with emotions and all of those things. Whatever we can all do to create ripples of impact and create a better world for all of us.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, we're all neighbors. The reservation is we're nestled right between Pocatello and Blackfoot and Idaho Falls and American Falls, and you got Soda Springs and Lava Hot Springs. So all of this land is historically was originally part of our reservation. And I think that's where I would like to acknowledge that to everybody listening, is that, pay attention, be aware, inform your children. I know that not everyone's going to say, okay, but as long as we're acknowledging that in our school systems, and that's one thing that I'm doing, in leveraging the tribal history.
Yeah.
I'm giving that voice to others so they can go ahead and educate the teachers. I was really fortunate when I was working for the tribes as a public affairs manager. I did that for 11 years. I loved the job. But, it was just a time for me to grow. And so currently, I'm working for the federal government. And I won't mention what branch, but I do work for the federal government now. And as such, I'm still playing that role of bridging the two, tribal and federal, which is so needed. And I think at all levels, from elementary, high school, college, governments, corporations, organizations, everybody has not studied history, since they were in school. So if you didn't go to school or you didn't take an anthropology class and actually get that knowledge, a lot of people are just kind of doing the same thing every day, going to work, raising children. That's fine. But again, it's like, look at the actual deeper meaning of what this area means to you. If you live in Blackfoot or if you live in Pocatello, these areas were all thriving with Native American people hunting and gathering and raising our children. A lot of these hills all have Shoshone names. A lot of people don't know that, but we do. We acknowledge that still. And that's important for us, because that says that we still have our ties, our roots, and our ties are to this land. Always will be. Always will be.
Think of the name Pocatello. What does that mean, Chief? What? So,
yeah, Chief Pocatello, and there's a lot of information that I think needs to also come out on that. I really do wish that we had better relationships with the Pocatello. And again, I'm not the official spokesperson for the tribes no more, but I just know there's a lot of history there that still needs to be worked on.
Right.
And I hope that there's some resolution in the next coming years, so that way our children can thrive and they're aware of that history as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow, so much depth, so much history in such a short time. Just like sharing everything, like it's a lot to take in, and I can't even imagine how you're pulled in 100 million different directions. Now, how did Disney and Pixar and all that come up?
You know, that just comes with what I do, right? I do work for a lot of museums, and so when there's that connection of corporations like Disney and Netflix wanting to, get the right tribal voice, my name is thrown out there. But with Netflix, there's a new movie coming out where it involves the Shoshone tribe, and so I helped with that. In the manuscript, making sure that the tribal voices were correct, spellings, historical landmarks. So a lot of that information I was able to help out with. And again, my background is in museum studies, and so learning where we come from and the history, down to our treaties, all of that, I have to be able to learn and know, and so that has really helped contribute to the information that I have, and I really enjoyed that Netflix participating in that. I can't say too much about it because it will be released, and I'll, if you follow me on social media, I will share that once it's available to be shared. The Disney, I actually helped them out with a cartoon where Sacajawea was a cartoon graphic, and so I was able to help them come up with a visual graphic that was Shoshone approved, which is basically down to her hair, what she was wearing, everything about that graphic design. So
How awesome is
yeah,
that?
so I was able to help out with that. But again, if you follow my social media, I do post a lot of things that I'm doing in the community, movements, resources that, I feel compelled to share. So I'm on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn.
Okay.
So.
I follow you on LinkedIn. I love seeing your journey. That's another reason I kind of know what's going on because I'm following you.
Yeah.
And then we end up in some of the same places. And it's fun to watch your journey. It's fun to be one of your cheerleaders and
Thank you.
and literally just watching your success and watching you be able to spread knowledge about your tribe and about the history and the culture and the language that, it is super important to keep that alive.
Oh, yes, it is. And I would have to say that, amplifying tribal storytelling and amplifying, who we are here in the state of Idaho. There are 5 tribes in the state of Idaho. I don't think a lot of people realize that there are 5. We are the largest tribe in the state of Idaho, the Shoshone-Bannocks. We are the largest land-based tribe as well. We own 98% of the reservation lands, and that's a huge win for our tribe because a lot of tribes that have reservations, they were given very little. And, again, we lost over 1 million acres when our reservation was created. So what was promised to us was not put in paper. Actually, it was a misspelling, and that's how we lost a lot of that land.
Wow.
And by the time that our tribal leaders tried to do anything, there was already a town being built. And so, so history plays a big role in the current situation of how reservations and how we think. It really is. History does play a huge role. And I feel that, it's good to acknowledge it, but, we can't blame anybody because those people are gone, and it's time for us to work together so we can be better neighbors and understand one another.
Absolutely. What kind of rituals do you still keep up or that you want to pass on that you think are super important for you and your family and your culture that you want to make sure that you're doing every day?
I wouldn't call it rituals. I would call it just our daily process, and that is praying. I mean, I think a lot of people think that Native Americans don't have a God. We do. Same God. And you know, our religion is Native American. So we pray. We participate in Sweat Lodge, which is a form of our church. So we go in there to purify, you know, our minds and our body. And that has really helped keep me grounded, you know, in all the things that I've done over since I was 18. You know, I grew up around the Sweat Lodge. I grew up around horses, and just having my parents be there for me to support me, my children, my siblings, you know. So all of that's been so important to me, because you know, I could be living in New York City if I really wanted to. You know, there's a lot of amazing positions out there that need somebody that understands tribal government, that understands reservation life. You know, I was born and raised, but I have always chosen to come back to Idaho. This is my home, always will be. And so I forgot where I left off, but my point is my daily ritual is praying, and I do write in a journal, because again, you know, I like to reflect back on, okay, what was going on last month, or what was going on last week? What was I feeling?
Right.
You know, because every week I feel like I'm doing something. And even my kids, they'll say, Mom, where are you off to this week? Or where are you going? Or what are you doing?
Right.
If it's a luncheon, or if it's a museum exhibit opening, or, you know, something, I'm always there because I enjoy supporting those entities that support us as a tribal community. And whether or not I'm the only Native American there, you know, it matters to me that we're being represented, even if I show up, and, you know, it's important to me to be there. So.
Absolutely. A quick question. How did it feel when you moved to Santa Fe, and what was that scene when you were in college? Or you were in Albuquerque and Santa Fe, right?
Yeah, so after high school, I went to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
I'm going there in 3 weeks, my first time ever, so I'm really excited.
Beautiful. It's a culture shock.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is it's thriving with just a diverse mix of everybody. I really felt at home in Santa Fe, in New Mexico in general, because it's a melting pot of Native American people. You've got the Navajo Nation, you have the Pueblos, you've got the Apaches, and then, you know, so you feel like you're already part of that community. You go to Walmart, I mean, and there's just a ton of brown-skinned people, and it's natural. And nobody, I just feel like stereotype and racism, it doesn't exist as strong as it does here in Idaho. I really hate to say that.
No, I get it.
But, I mean, I think a lot of the listeners out there may understand that, you know. Even when I go to Walmart here, I tend to have some people think that I'm Hispanic. And it's kind of like, it's like you got to recognize that there's a large population of Hispanic and Native American, and we're intermixing, and that's good. And it's just because we have a lot of our young ones, they can't marry another tribal person from here because we're pretty much all related. You know, it really is a true fact. And so, you know, I'm related to probably 75% of the tribe. And so, you know, my ex-husband, he's actually a California native. And so you have to kind of go out of state. But Santa Fe is a beautiful place. It's full of a lot of history, tribal history. You know, you have historical landmarks, and you have beautiful jewelry, and the food. I really miss the food and the jewelry. And so you will definitely enjoy Santa Fe. But I enjoyed it, and I loved it. And I ended up going to Albuquerque to University of New Mexico, and, you know, so I've lived in a lot of different places, and then came home to Idaho.
Coming back to Idaho, right?
Yep, and now I'm here to stay.
Yeah. So does Teton have a specific meaning?
So again, Teton is not a name that we gave to ourselves.
Okay.
It was a name that was given to the mountain range.
Yeah.
And then the so it was named after the French Canadians actually named the Tetons. And this is funny, but it's named after, it's actually said it's the Troy Teton, if I'm saying that correct. It's French, and it means big breasts.
Great.
I know. I take a pause intentionally because it's it's an icebreaker, right? And so they named the Native Americans that just because we lived by Jenny's Lake.
Okay.
And so when we were kind of, hey, forced away, that's what we are named.
Okay.
And so it's French for, mountain peaks reminded the French fur trappers of big breasts. And so it's definitely very unique.
Yeah.
But it's what matters is the history of the tribal people that live there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so our people, a lot of Native American peoples, they didn't have last names. We actually went by just one name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Oh, that's interesting. I appreciate you sharing that. I had no idea many things. I've learned so many things today, and I'm hoping our listeners have too. I wish you well in everything you do. I feel like you're living in your purpose and really creating ripples of impact for your tribe, for our communities. And I love supporting and being a part of watching the journey, being someone that's ready to cheer or be alongside or whatever I can do to support or just kind of share the story. I mean, that's what the responsibility is, to share knowledge, share the story, buy the book, check out the website, follow on social media. I mean, hopefully if you've listened to this today, you've learned a whole bunch of things like I have. I know a lot about you and your journey, but I still learn new things today that help inform me and help me develop and understand how we all work together and what your needs are and what our schools need, what our communities need. How do we all learn to dance a little better dance?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, speaking of dance, I encourage everybody to come out and support the Shoshone-Bannock Festival the second weekend of August. Mm-hmm. So it's a 4-day celebration that my people host, and it definitely is a beautiful time to engage and understand and just watch and listen to the drums and to watch the dancers. I'll actually be out dancing, so I'll be out in the dance arena. Also, I'm looking at having a booth, so I'll have my books available. I'll have posters. I'll have my coins. And another thing, too, I want to throw out is the 2024 coins. A lot of people, because they don't see it being used in the banks or at the supermarkets, there's a reason for that. And this is something I learned, in working with the U.S. Mint, is that banks actually have to buy the money that they hold in the bank. You will not find the dollar coins available in rolls at the local banks because they have found that people are hoarding them, meaning they're keeping the coins. They're, like me, I give them as gifts instead of circulating them. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. Mint would like to see circulation happen, meaning you go and use it at the gas station, you go use it at the mail station, for your mail. But the coin is actually seen more in the East Coast and the West Coast for transportation. So using the metro, some people can go to the post office and use a $5 bill, and then you receive from the vending machine, you'll receive some coins. So I have a couple of people that tag me, when they receive a coin, because nobody really sees the coin being used.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to just throw out there is that, it's a known fact that banks need to purchase their money. I have coins. I keep up with them, and I don't know if a lot of you as viewers or audience knows, but the coin actually changes the design every year.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So collectors know this because they collect the series. So on my website, you'll see that I have the coins, and these are uncirculated, meaning nobody has touched the coin but me, the model. And it becomes, it's a collector's coin.
Okay.
And so what I do a little special is I'll take each coin that I get and I will put my thumbprint on my face, and then I will put it in a plastic airtight container so that way it's locked in. 20 years from now, or from the time I went and put my thumbprint on that coin, my thumbprint will show up as my mark, my signature.
That is so cool.
And what that does is it increases the value. And especially when I'm gone, God forbid, it'll definitely increase in value because I only hold a certain amount in stock. And then once I'm sold out, I'm sold out. So
now you're getting people to hoard them more. We want to see them in circulation, but everyone still hold on to them. Right? I see what's going on.
In my book, it's kind of fun too. I did start the book off with something that I do with my children is I every tooth that they lost, I'd give them a coin. And so that's what starts the whole story off is this young girl recognizes and says, or actually grandma, she says, I see the tooth fairy left something for my granddaughter. And then she says in Shoshone, Gagu, is this an Indian girl? And grandma says, that's a young Shoshone girl just like you. And her name is Sacajawea. And then the little girl says, Grandma, how did she get on a coin? And then it goes to grandma envisioning this beautiful Shoshone girl, and her name is Sacajawea. She was very brave, who traveled hundreds of miles to find her way home. And that's the beginning of the story.
Oh, I can't wait.
So
I'm super excited.
Yes.
And I hope that everybody that gets a chance to listen to this shares it and shares the book, gives it as gifts, all of those things. Follows on the coins, the collecting and the dispersing, tagging, whatever you can do whatever you can do. I love that. Thank you so much for being on the show. I would like to ask you a final couple questions at the end. I always ask, if you could talk to your younger self, what wisdom have you gained that you would like to tell your younger self or even your younger children, things that you might have worried about or stressed out about early on? What do you wish you knew then?
That's a big one. I guess the first thing I would have told myself is choose another degree. I probably, if I could talk to myself, I would have chose to go into communications. But then when I think about it, if I would have chose communications, I don't think I would have been able to contribute to the historical aspect of the things that I've been doing. So I think I'm okay, actually, at where I've been. But if I was to go back, I probably would have recommended taking more language classes from my tribe. And or listening, because at that time my grandparents were alive, maybe asking them more questions. And so it's taboo to record. When I was growing up, we were told never to record, never to write down. And so that has changed to today. I encourage my kids, go and record your grandpa, go and record, auntie, when they're talking about stories, because honestly, it's capturing that voice because of how they tell stories. It's a lot different. Our elders, long time ago, when they would tell stories, we would only tell it in the wintertime. We would never tell them in the spring or summer. And so, there were certain things that we needed to follow. And there was reasons why. And that's what I tell my children. So, but yes, it would be to learn my language. I would love to learn my language. And I know there's classes available at the tribes. It's just finding time to participate on those Zoom calls.
Absolutely. That is incredible. Oh, thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad that you came and shared your message. And please share this. Please like, subscribe, share the podcast, buy the book. Yes, it's her story, Sacajawea.
Randy'L Teton, thank you. Go find her on her website and on her social media and share the story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.